Texas?
Yes.
It's a very
Oh,
popular thing in Texas, at
okay.
least where I'm
Okay.
at. Like you'll see like at least maybe 1 to 2 out of 5 people will have something Bucky's related on them.
Really?
Even
Okay,
the
I didn't
Yeti,
know
yeah,
that.
even the Yeti,
I
yeah.
know what's up, Tony. Okay.
Okay, sorry. Apparently I don't.
That's
What's next?
awesome.
Welcome to Playing in Traffic, y'all. We have a very special guest today. A very, very special guest. Luis is here with us. He's a former member and a former survivor with all of us. And he was baptized in the WMSCOG in Oklahoma in 2012. And so today's the first time that we're going to be speaking with somebody from that part of the country. So I'm really excited to hear some stories from Oklahoma. And then later he moved to Texas, where he also attended the WMSCOG. And he was in there for about 6 years. So for a long time. So, Luis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for finally having me.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in the Michelle rabbit hole right now. So, but we're so glad that we found time and to have you on and to hear your story.
Yeah, I'm actually really happy that I waited till after the episodes because a lot of that stuff actually happened like right before and as I was like, freshly there and starting. And
Right.
so they really did keep everyone sheltered there in that side. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, you guys have actually heard Luis's voice. He's been on the podcast. His voice was on. So now we're actually doing our interview with him. So, Luis was on the first episode of the Michelle series or season, whatever it's called.
Who is Michelle Cologne? Have you been enjoying those episodes before we get into it? Like, has it been changing your opinion of what happened in the courts, or is it sort of what you expected, or?
So when I heard about like the lawsuits when I was in, we were constantly told like, hey, these people are going after the church. They something happened and they're just completely against the church, and that was basically like the whole like their damage control, right? And so I didn't really understand. Of course, they're not going to say both sides of the story since they control all the information. And so when I started listening to it, I'm like, man, I had no idea that she was behind the actual website. Like I had no idea. And it wasn't until 2020 when I actually got on the website and like really just dug through it. And but like I said, I had no idea that was her. And then finally hearing the story and everything from her side, like I felt so bad because I'm like, man, they really just, it was like Jordan said, a smear campaign. They dragged her name through the dirt in that cult. It was ridiculous. And so finally hearing it now, I'm like, I'm so glad I heard her side and like how they treated her and everything, because you see that type of treatment towards people, but of course, you're so brainwashed, you don't see it that way. You don't really feel that sympathy towards them. It's
Right, that's
crazy.
true. You almost feel like, oh, well, it's justified. They deserve our shunning or
Yeah,
something,
exactly. You're like they had it coming,
Right, they had
and
it
then
coming.
and you're
They
always
shouldn't have
like,
done that.
yeah, it
Yeah,
was like better them than me, basically
right.
type of mindset for it. But yeah, I'm glad I
Interesting.
waited. It was a really good series, is what I would call it. I mean, it was great. Like I've
Cool.
learned so much in it, and actually getting to know her as well. I thought that was pretty awesome too.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's so cool. She's like Tony and I are like, Michelle is like our spirit animal. She's so like strong and like fierce, and Tony and I are kind of weenies, so it's cool to like make friends.
We're not, dude. We
We're
survived a cult. We can do anything.
not
We
Yeah.
are
only
strong.
you and I are we just have a different personality than Michelle, so it's so nice having like a really strong, powerful
Oh
female.
yeah, definitely,
Right.
definitely.
Weenies.
All
We're weenies.
right, let's get into Luis's story.
Sorry.
Well, what month were you baptized?
It was in June of 2012. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So I
Start
didn't hear anything about the end of the world till I want to say like the winter, no, more like the fall of 2012. So I felt like I was on a fast track course type thing because they had me like studying nonstop. Like my ex-wife was just having me come and study and study and study, and then next thing I know, I had like the first ten subjects done, and they were like, here, time to go preaching now. And so I don't know if I had mentioned this before, but I was in the military still while I was in the cult, and so It's funny because hearing Michelle say how their analogies were related into what her profession was like hers was always about like the spiritual hospital. Well, so mine was always the spiritual military. And so I guess they knew that, but I felt like they just constantly wanted to like compare everything so that would like, I guess, relate to me more. And
And I
so,
Tony said the same thing about motherhood. She was very like
yeah,
by
exactly.
being a mom, how mother's love and her mother's love. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
crazy. That's,
they make everything they make everything spiritual. I mean, it's ridiculous, like any little thing that they can find. Oh, I see it. It's a copy and shadow of what's in heaven and on earth. That's
Can you
what you
give us
hear
some
all the time.
examples of how they would compare the military to the church, just so
Yeah,
people can hear
so
what it's like?
so I forgot whose episode it was talking about how, so after they explained how the prophecy failed, they said that we had failed the inspection, right? And so they felt the need to have me give an example of how an inspection works in the military, right? And so I had explained that you're in formation in front of everybody, serious face, and then the whoever's in charge of that battalion or company, whatever, they come and like they inspect you, like literally everything you're wearing, right? And so in my case, I was in the Marine Corps, so I had my dress blues on, and they were like inspecting every little thing. And I told them that I had failed because I had a little string hanging out of the belt loop. That's what made me fail. And obviously they ate that up. They were like, "See, this is how God is going to nitpick everybody. For any little sin that you have, that's what they're going to use. And so it was a lot of things like that, even with being like well groomed and stuff. You're in the military. You constantly have to have a haircut, clean shaven face. You're dressed incredibly properly, and all that kind of stuff. And so they constantly use that with me. And like now that I'm out and I see it and I like think back on it, I'm like, man, it was it was ridiculous.
oh, that's crazy. That's so interesting because I don't think we have talked to anybody who was in the military.
Yeah, so originally when I was in, my contract was for reservist, but towards the end of my schooling, I wanted to go active, but it was kind of too late. But they basically helped me out to where when I got to a unit, I could request active duty orders, which meaning I would be able to be on base, right? And so I was attached to a unit in Texas first, and then I went to one in Oklahoma. And so the one in Texas, I was only there for a little bit before me and my ex, well, she convinced me to move to Oklahoma, and then that's where I would basically keep going and studying. It's kind of weird. So I was in North Carolina, and I'm basically gonna tell y'all how she had preached to me. So
Yeah.
I was in North Carolina at
So
my school.
when she preached to you, she's just like a stranger.
No,
She had,
no. I was very close with her family. That lives in Texas. Her cousins were basically my best friends, right? One of them is actually still in, and I think he just became a deacon, I believe. But the other one, he's the one that got me to join the Marine Corps, and so I was really close with him. And so I'm stationed over there in North Carolina, and I'm just bored out of my mind. And I'm talking to friends, just Skyping with them, talking to them online. And I remember seeing her post something on Facebook about her like being upset because she was going to move in with people and it didn't work out. Turns out she was actually going to move in with members of the church. Yeah, I found that out later. And so I was talking to her, just trying to cheer her up and everything. And then she ended up asking me about my beliefs, and I was like, well, I believe there's something out there. I don't know what. I guess I could say I was agnostic back then. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but I didn't like going to church. I hated going to church. Um, and so she starts telling me about what she believes in, that she believes in not only God the Father, but God the Mother. I'm like, okay, well, that's an interesting concept. I had seen a movie not long before that actually kind of explained that. I don't know, maybe you guys have seen it. It's called Dogma. Yeah, so it's with like the same people that wrote like a lot of the Jay and Silent Bob movies, and that's how I'd seen it. So when I thought of that movie, I'm like, okay, yeah, they put God in like a
was
feminine
Alanis
perspective.
Morissette mother in that one.
Yeah,
Oh my
and
God,
so and
Tony.
so,
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time my sister got me high? She made me watch that movie.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we love dogma. And I think that's important. Like we kind of already had like an open mind to
Yeah,
think, oh, there's a
exactly.
female God. Why not?
And
Right.
then that's what she had asked me. She was like, "Are you
Right.
very open-minded?" And I was like, "Yeah. I mean, who's not? You know, I'm one of those people that like to learn about just whatever's out there, whatever theory you have, throw it at me. You know, I wanna hear it." And so then she showed me this video on YouTube, and it was actually who they claim to be God the Mother. And I was like, okay, she showed me a video of some Asian lady. You know, I don't understand what's going on.
That's not Alanis Morissette.
Yeah, no, I had no clue who it was, and I'm like, well, what is this, you know? And she was like, well, what if I told you there's a possibility that that's God? I'm like, I mean, I need the proof, you know, like you can't just go out and claim that somebody's God.
At this time, was she your girlfriend?
No, we were just talking, kind of
Okay.
like I guess she was leading me on to that. It was more so we were just talking every day at that point, and so my fiance is gonna hate this, but I was actually talking to her at that time as well, since I was in high school with her. We were still talking, but not like that. And so I kind of just cut her off, and she reminds me about this every single day. I kid you not.
Okay. At least she knows.
Oh yeah,
She,
she knows.
okay, we're
She
not
knows.
like revealing
I'm
something.
like,
Yeah.
we can edit this out.
No,
I'm
no,
just
she
kidding.
knows. Um, and so then she actually asked about do I like to read? And I'm like, yeah, I used to read a lot when I was in high school. And I told her that I had just finished reading the Da Vinci Code. And so I was really into like symbolism and conspiracy theories and whatnot. And so she was like, well, if I mail you a book, would you read it? And so I was like, yeah, sure, why not? You know. And she ends up mailing me the little green book. What was it? Visitors of an Angelic World. That one. So she mailed me that one, and yeah, so I read it. I read the whole thing, and the author's name stuck out to me. So I'm like, I've never seen a name written like that before. I thought it was kind of odd. And so we end up Skyping later, and she's asking me like, hey, what'd you think of the book? I'm like, oh, it was interesting. You know, it really opened a lot of like theories for me. Like I had never thought to see the Bible in that perspective. And so I asked her about the author. I'm like, who's the author though? I was like, I'm curious about that name. And she basically told me, oh, well, if I find a church near you, would you be willing to go? I'm like, I don't know. It just depends on if there's one, at least in my area. Because I was actually in Jacksonville, North Carolina at the time. And I think she gave me the address to a church in Charlotte, I believe, which is about 2 hours away. And I think that's like flying. Can't remember, but yeah, that's pretty far. And I
Yeah.
told her, I'm like, well, I'm still considered student status, so I can't really leave that far unless I put in a request for leave. But actually, I forgot what's his name. Anthony told me that they actually had a church in Wilmington, I believe, and so he knew somebody there that I actually met in Dallas later on. Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. It made me realize like what a small world it was as far as like with members. And so yeah, she sends me that book. I read it and everything, and I had questions. So then when I fly back towards the end of like June, yeah, so it was actually July that I got baptized. So I flew back in June, and we were talking, and then she ended up taking me to a service. I want to say it was like a third service on a Sabbath day, and there was a deacon that sat next to me. And keep in mind, I had never been to a church where the women wore veils or anything like that. So right off the bat, I saw that freaked me out. I'm like, what's going on? Like this doesn't look right. And and then the love bombing. The love bombing was so intense. I mean, I felt like a child, and they were like praising everything that I was doing, laughing at all my jokes, and I was like, okay, let's see where this goes, And so I sit in the service, and I'm paying attention, and of course, the prayer of our wishes also threw me off. I'm like, everybody speaks. I thought it was either Chinese or Japanese. Like I had no idea what it was. I didn't know they were, it was in Korean. And so that freaked me out also. So I'm like, man, I have never been to a church like this. And I think that's what also kept my curiosity is I had never been experienced anything like that. I've gone to a Buddhist temple. I've gone to Protestant churches, Lutheran. I mean, you name it. Being in the military, you have like basically all those doors that you can go to because on base there's so many different nationalities and whatnot, and so they all have to keep those religious services. And me just always being curious about it, I went to all of them. And what's funny is I almost got tricked into going into a Mormon church once. They had a shuttle on base, and some of my friends that were Mormon tried to get me to go. And once I saw how they were dressed, I'm like, where are we going? Where are you guys taking me? Oh, well, we're gonna go to the mall, but we're gonna go and stop at our church first. I'm like, yeah, no, stop the shuttle. I'll get off here and I'll call a
Which
cab.
is hilarious because then you ended up dressing just like them.
Exactly, right? What are the odds? I think about that a lot.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh.
man, how it's so ironic, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I after that service they asked me all these questions, and I didn't stay to study. It was just more so she just took me to go see, right? And so then a little bit after, I go up to Oklahoma with her to meet her family. And by this time we're already dating, right? I mean, like unofficially, I guess we just kept talking and it kind of just led to that. And so she takes me to Oklahoma, and that's when I spend the entire Sabbath day there, like the whole day. And I remember the guy that I was studying with, he was so like amazed that I was answering all the questions, you know, to study. He didn't realize that I had read that book already, so I kind of understood where the studies were going, you know. And so we did, I want to say like 3 or 4 studies, and then he uh he told me about Father. He was like, he wrote the name down, and I'm thinking like, okay, that I was like, that's the same name as the author, you know. I was like, is this like some secret password or what's going on, like what is this? And so he's like, well, this is the name of the second coming of Christ. I'm like, so this is the proof that I've been wanting, like this is like what basically like solidified my thoughts on it. I'm like, all right, cool. Did all the studies. I think it was like Lesson of the Fig Tree, Tree of Life, just like, and some other basic ones, right? And and so I was like, okay, well, what's next? And then we did Be Baptized Immediately. And of course, they put that one as like in a spiritual sense, and I do the air quotes. They basically said that that name was like the cure to spiritual cancer. And then they were like, if the doctor came and told you that you had a terminal illness, and then this was the solution, you were completely cured and everything, would you take it like right then and there? I'm like, of course. Who wouldn't? It's crazy. Like if that's what saves you, take it. And so, sure enough, that's how they got me with that. So I ended up getting baptized right after that. And that I got scared during that baptism because I didn't know I was gonna get wet. Like they didn't really explain all that at first. And so he gives me a robe and he's like, here, put this on. I'm like, well, what's this for? Like, oh, well, you're gonna get baptized. I'm like, well, I had already been baptized. And it's funny because in boot camp I got baptized into I think it was like a Protestant church. The only reason I did that was to get out of some of the training that was going on, because they were offering people to do baptisms for the church, and I think at the time they were doing this training with it was like climbing this really tall course, and I was terrified of heights at the time, so I was like, maybe I can get out of this by doing this. And so I took it, and I got chewed out in boot camp for it. But I had told them, I was like, hey, well, I've already been baptized, so why do I need to do it again? Oh, well, you didn't do it in the correct name. You have to do it in this name. That way it works. This is like the real one. So I'm like, oh, okay, all right, sure. I'm already here. You're already giving me the rope, so why not? I don't want to be disrespectful and not do it. And so they have me kneeling in the little tub at the church location, and this location was about, I want to say, like 20, almost 30 minutes east of Oklahoma City. It was in this place called Choctaw. So it really wasn't in Oklahoma City at the time where they have one now. It was just east of it, out in the country. And so it was a decent sized church, but it was a very, small amount of like very active members. And so I noticed that a lot of the leaders come in and they start, putting on their veils and start singing. And I'm like, man, am I, what's going on? Like, it's kind of scary. And so, yeah, the missionary comes out and starts pouring the water on me and starts praying over me. And I'm like, this is a very different baptism that I've seen. I've seen Catholic baptisms and even just Christian churches. Like, you either sit in the tub and they dunk you, or actually, yeah, that's how it is in Catholic churches. But when you're a kid, they dunk you in the water, basically. And so for them to be doing all that, praying over your head and everything, it was different. And I guess since it was all different, it still made me want to keep going. I was like, it feels different, and I really didn't like the churches growing up. Like, it's just, I didn't understand the whole concept of like where does the money go? And it's so funny, and it gets me mad too at the same time that I fell for it, what I was against for so long. Like I didn't understand why people would give money to churches if those churches don't help the people out. You know what I mean? And like I even asked a pastor one time at my brother's church about it, and he got so offended. I'm like, well, you're driving this really nice car, and I just ran into a member that's like sick, and she needs money for a surgery, and yet nobody's doing anything. And my brother took me home, and apparently he had let him know, like, hey, you're not really welcome there anymore. I was like, okay, that's fine. At least I was asking questions, and that kind of like answered my question to him being so defensive like that. And so that left a bad taste in my mouth about how churches were so greedy. But look what happened.
That's an interesting point too, because I think that when you're in it, that probably is a big reason why it's hard to ever want to go out and look at the information that's available, because then you have to admit that you fell for something, that most people join that specific church for that reason. It's different, and it's not the same bullshit of all the other churches in America. Like, you're a part of something that is different than that, and that must be devastating. I think that's probably a lot of like why when you come out it's so painful. And
yeah, so when I was curious about like the whole tithes and offerings. They tell you about the envelopes. They kind of like tell you like this envelope goes to the church. This one goes to I forgot. I want to say it was like whatever church activities maybe. If I can't remember exactly. And then they say this one goes to mother, right? And you're just constantly giving all that money. But then later on, I'm like, we're the ones paying for a lot of this stuff. Like, I don't understand.
yeah,
You guys wait to do all this construction and stuff, and it's always around tax refund season. Like they wait for those big chunk of change, to come out and basically like ask for all that money.
yeah,
And that's what made me realize like later on how, excuse me, how in Oklahoma they did that, and then in Texas I saw it as well, because in Oklahoma I was there when they purchased the bigger building, and the same thing with Texas. I was there when they also got the bigger building, and it
yeah,
pisses me off that I gave into both of those, and I gave a lot of money.
yeah,
And so I didn't understand, because I'm like, if we're putting all this money towards this is going to Korea, yet like why are we still having to put even more money?
yeah,
And then I think one of them had told me, I remember hearing them say like, well, Korea only puts up a certain amount, and then the members have to pay the rest. And I mean, it's like thousands of dollars that they're requesting from the members. And I mean, all the money you give during their feast and whatnot, like it's a ridiculous just amount of money that they receive.
yeah,
And that was one of the main things that led me to like realize it was a cult. Because when I left, I didn't think that at all. It
yeah,
wasn't. I didn't leave because of I didn't really believe or anything like that. It was, I just started seeing a lot of toxic traits in not only the members but of leadership, and then I started realizing that like I shouldn't be living like this unhealthy. Like having anxiety every single day, being stressed out. I
mm.
mean, I started growing a whole bunch of gray hair. It was ridiculous. It was just constant stress.
Well, Tony and I are actually, I think we'll release it today that we're recording. So by the time this comes out, it'll be out there. But we did a propaganda episode.
Oh, really?
And so that one, we kind of pointed on that about how like how they followed the tactics of propaganda. And so in that episode, we're like, of course you guys have PTSD. Of course you guys are anxious. Like, they were purposefully like making you guys scared.
Yeah. So, Tony, did they ever have you guys watch the movie The Road?
I read the book.
So there was a
I
movie.
read the book after coming out. Lindsay made me read it, and it was so scary and so
Yeah.
triggering.
So that's the one that they made the movie on, right?
There's a movie?
Yeah,
Yeah. So the movie, they had us watch that movie when I was in Oklahoma, when it was like leading up to like the last days kind of stuff, to like basically scare everybody shitless. Like, I mean, that movie was intense. And I haven't seen that movie since. I actually want to watch it again to see how intense it was again. Because what's funny is I used to be into those movies before, right? So I was a very big like zombie fan. Like I like the zombie genre. That's what I was in. I mean, I was just, I don't know what it was about like the undead, like I've seen every zombie movie you can just name it, right? But they used that against me when I came in because they asked me like what the stuff I was into, and it's funny because I had a belt that said it said something zombies on it that I had bought in North Carolina, and they had rebuked me for wearing it one day when we were doing construction, I believe, or cleanup, because it was in red. I mean, it looked like blood, but it was those cool belts that are like belt buckles, like the car belt buckles, the seat belts. And so
Yeah.
I mean, I still have the belt, but it made me feel so bad about it. But I was like, I'm not gonna throw it away.
Yeah.
But
Because
yeah.
it was red.
Well, it was black and it had that red, but they were like zombies. They represent
Yeah,
the dead of the
zombies,
world. Yeah,
vampires, anything like that. Ghosts, no way.
it
Like
was.
there's nothing like scary like that allowed.
Yeah, and so they
What was that Will Smith movie where he was the last one
oh, I Am
alive?
Legend. Yeah,
I
I
Am
Am Legend.
Legend. We all actually we went to the movie theater to see that one,
Oh, did
which
y'all?
was surprising. But yeah,
Wait,
they
like
love those
while you were in, they let you?
like
Wow.
with
Yeah,
the
we didn't do that.
pastor, the people, we all went to the movie theater
Wow.
together.
Yeah, no, they didn't. We didn't do any of that. Like they didn't let us do that over there. Like even if you would go out with members over there outside of the church, you would still kind of get, rebuked for it. But my ex, she she was a very prominent member. She wasn't a deaconess, but how you guys were talking about that 10 talents movement, I think she actually had completed it whenever in Oklahoma. Like she had a bunch of people that were like that became group leaders and stuff, right? So I felt like because of that, I had some expectations to meet. Like they were like, well, she bears all this really good fruit. She
Like you're
has
holding her back. You need to keep up with her.
well, not necessarily that. They had me just like constantly busy, and so I would always go with her in the beginning. We were there almost every day. I think the only days that we didn't go were on Sundays because she has a really big family, and she had in Oklahoma alone she has 6 siblings. So we were constantly doing stuff with them. You know, yeah, a lot of siblings, and so they were actually even going to the cult as well. I think only four of them, no, five of them were going. One of them was from another mom, I believe. But yeah, so they were all going. So it was family day was going to church. That's it, going all the time. But when in 2012 there were no community service activities or anything like that. There was none of that. It was just constant like study and preach, study and preach. That's all you're doing. And so they indoctrinate you so freaking hard in the beginning. So I want to say from like July all the way till I want to say maybe like September to or November, one of those two. It was around that time. It was just like constant studying. I had already done all 50 subjects. And they gave me book one, and they were basically like saying, "Hey, we want you to basically be, with some form of title." And so they basically recommended me to become what is it called? A unit leader. So in Oklahoma, the way their structure was, they had, the missionaries, then the group leaders, and then those group leaders had unit leaders, which was basically like an assistant. And so that's what they wanted me to do, right? And so they said that they were going to start this brand new academy called Elohim Academy, which they did whatever book you were working on, you tested out this whole week, right? And so I was, in my mind, I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to study hard. I'm going to set this goal. I really want to do it. So the academy started. They give you like this whole list of like what all you're testing out at what time to be there on time and to pray and all this stuff, right? So I'm doing this every day. I want to say I probably tested out like 3 to 4 times every day and leading up all the way till Friday. And they said that they were going to announce the results. I want to say that's that following Sabbath day. So my group leader pulls me aside and he's like, "Hey, he's like, I know you tried really hard, but you were a couple points shy of being a unit leader." He's like, "This is what you need to work on, and try to implement all this on the next time." So at first it bothered me because I really did try hard. I was like, man, I was really disappointed in myself because I felt like I was lacking so much, and I didn't realize it was just them kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like belittling me to make me feel that that sadness to want to keep trying, right? So they had another one scheduled a couple months down the road. And again, back at it. I'm studying, I'm preaching. When me and my ex would drive, I would preach to her, like, trying to remember, like they were like really big on you memorizing the verses of like every subject. And so that's what I was working on. And so, okay, the next one comes around, right? And again, same thing. And I kept testing out with the different group leader that I ended up disliking a lot because he would nitpick everything. You could preach this sermon to him 1,000 times and he's still gonna find something wrong with it. Whether it was you not having enough conviction in your voice, you not being confident, you're not being
Can you
bold.
say who it was really quick? We can blurt it out by
I don't
name.
know if you met him because I
Yeah.
think they went to Denver a couple times. But
Okay.
yeah, so he was, I mean, he was flat out an asshole, but he did it to where he was a gracious one, if you want to put it that way. And so he was always like nitpicking every little thing that I was doing. Not even just through the Elohim Academy, but like even when it was just constant services, right? And so he's the one that tells me like, hey, you didn't do this right, you didn't do this right. I mean, maybe next time try harder, right? And so they gave that position to somebody else. And I won't lie, it hurt. I was pretty upset with it because you put in a lot of hard work and a lot of effort just for them to like basically just shit on it. And so I guess either my ex told them that it was really bothering me, or maybe they saw it, but I kind of stopped participating in as much. I kind of wanted to like, because keep in mind, I'm like nonstop. And so I'm like, you know what? Let me take a break. Let me relax. And so this happened for a couple months, but I felt like that was still like nitpicking. So I didn't wear a suit. I want to say maybe like the first from when I was baptized all the way to the end of the year almost. I didn't want to wear a suit because you're in the military. You always have to wear a uniform, right? I didn't want to keep doing that. And so I was starting to buy more slacks and more dress shirts and ties, but I wasn't wearing the jacket. And so one day that deacon pulls me out. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but he wasn't a deacon at the time. He was just a group leader. He became a deacon, I want to say maybe in like 2014, I believe. And this was only in 2012, towards the end of 2012. And pulls me outside and he has a suit. And I'm like, what's that? He was like, he's like, this is for you, so you can give all glory to God while you're in service. You don't have to not keep wearing one. I'm like, and I'm thinking in my mind, I was a little offended. I'm like, what are you trying to say? And so I was like, all right, cool. And I guess he wanted me to put that suit on like at that moment, and I just put it in my car. And I went and talked to my ex. I'm like, hey, he gave me a suit, and she was like, did you say thank you? I'm like, I mean, yeah, but I mean, it's bothering me. And she was like, well, you need to get rid of that mindset because he did something that he didn't have to do, and this and that. And I'm like, well, I didn't tell him to buy me one. Nobody told him. So I don't see why I'm the bad guy. I didn't want a suit. And so, long story short, I basically ended up wearing it not that long after to say thank you and to not, be the bigger person, I guess. And
Dude, but
so,
that's a social pressure. It's little things like
exactly.
that, and then they
Yeah.
add up, and then they add up, and then they add up. Because you're
Yeah.
getting advice from your wife or not your wife, your girlfriend, right? Was she your
Well,
girlfriend at that
so
time? She
her and I
became your
married,
wife,
yeah,
right?
in
Yeah.
November of that year. Yeah. In
So even
2012.
like you go to her, somebody that you trust, and
Hmm.
she's like, you need to be humble. You just need to wear the suit. So it's like
Yep.
even among your loved ones, you're getting social pressure, and then you're getting, oh my gosh, it's
Yeah,
just,
she's like she's taking their side, and then
hmm
that I'm like, okay, well, it would have been nice if you had took my side, but then you kind of get to the point where you don't even want to confide in them anymore, because
right.
you already know whose side they're gonna take.
This
You
is
already know.
this is happening within all the relationships,
Yep.
and this is how things happen between the relation. All these tiny little details are important.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so I wear the suit, and of course they praise it. They praise it like
Mm.
crazy. Like, oh, he's finally changing. That was the biggest thing. You're changing. You're finally starting to give yourself. You're
Father
getting
and
rid of
mother
your
are
old
so
stuff.
proud. Yeah.
Exactly. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, it's not that bad. And so then I started getting more suits, but I never did my hair to the side. Like I never parted it, right?
That's
Because I
good.
couldn't grow it that long, of course. And so um yeah, so that was towards the end of the year. And then this is when I start hearing more of like all the slandering, right? And they're really starting to pick up on the countermeasures. Like there were two group leaders that went to, I want to say they went to I don't know if it was Korea or not. I don't know if they had gone that year. I can't remember. But they were the main ones, along with the missionary, that were like preaching the countermeasures. You know, they were doing all these big classes with everybody, and that they felt that were like becoming gospel workers. And so,
Can you explain what countermeasures are, like training you guys how to?
like rebuttals, like they're yeah. So, you know, like if you go preaching and then somebody tells you that the bride doesn't mean the church, or the bride is the church, and then they give you all these verses to like basically like defend, you know, the church of God, and you're doing all this stuff, right? And that's what they're just doing like constantly for the rest of that year. So then come 2013 rolls around, and then they say that Denver's having this really big seminar that's got a pastor from Korea coming, and like they want only specific people going. And so I didn't get asked at first if I wanted to go, but my ex did. So she got asked, and she said she was going to go. I'm like, all right, cool, you know, you can go. And I was like, you don't really need permission from me. You know, she's basically just letting me know she was going. And then I want to say maybe like a week before it, they asked me if I wanted to go. And I was like, well, what happened to this person that was supposed to go? And apparently they weren't able to make it. And so I was like, okay, I'll end up going, right? Why not? Let's see. You know, I want to see other churches, because the only two I had seen at the time was just Dallas and Oklahoma, right? And so we take the trip up there, and we got hit by a really bad hailstorm on the way there. And the whole time, like, I'm in the car and I'm asleep in the back seat, and then I just remember being woken up by all the hail. And it was, I want to say it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I wake up, you know, and I'm looking around, and the sister in the front seat had her veil on, and then the 2 brothers next to me were praying, and I was like, what's going on? Like, you know, I'm like looking around, I'm like, well, are we dying? Like, are we dead? What's happening? And then I shook the brother. I'm like, hey, what's up? What's going on? He's like, oh, there's a really bad hailstorm, but we're all praying right now that we're protected. You know, I'm like, oh, okay. So then I bow my head and I start praying along with them. And I think we were stuck under like in between an overpass. Like a whole bunch of cars had like gotten under there to not get hit, and this brother's car just got, like, I mean, it got nailed by all that hail. It was bad, and he was not upset about it. I'm looking at the car once we get to Denver. I'm like, man, that is bad.
He's like, thank God for the blessings.
Yeah,
It's
he was
okay.
like,
Thanks
oh,
to Father and
he's
Mother.
like, oh, I don't want this to be my idol. It's just a materialistic thing. And I'm like, dude, that's bad, man. It looked like somebody just got like a metal bar, and just stabbed his car. It was horrible. And so, yeah, so we get to Denver, and it was I want to say it was like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and they, you know, of course they welcome you with open arms. I think we had like a small little study once we got there, and then then they had the food.
There.
Yeah, she was there, and this is actually
Yeah.
where I met Chad there.
Oh, okay.
There was another member there that knew Chad, and he introduced me to him. And so that's how it was just for a short amount, but when I saw his face, I'm like, I know him. I had met him, but I didn't think he would remember me, obviously, since I wasn't there every day. But yeah, so I remember after that little service, whatever you want to call it, then came the food. And I will give y'all that the food in Denver was amazing. They had these fresh
Yeah.
cut watermelon slices, the sushi, just a whole bunch of stuff, you know. And so, you know, we're eating and everything, and then they tell us that we need to go to sleep because the next day it's going to be like an early morning prayer, like I think like at 5 a.m. or something. And so we were like, okay. And that's why I had asked you before if it was a college campus, because they had those rooms that had bunk beds and
Yep.
everything.
We built those. We built
Really?
those.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was impressive, because it looked like they were like actual dorm rooms. You know, they had the whole showers over there. And I mean, I thought it was a school that we were at. I'm like, how did they find a school that they bought and were able to change it this way? But that's crazy. But it makes sense, because every location you go, all the stuff you see, there's always members that are like those, that's their profession, and they abuse it because they want them to build that for free, you know? I mean, it's crazy
I
now.
know there's beautiful craftsmanship, right? I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because so much of the work is done with all their heart and it's done for free, but it's so beautiful. There are so many talented people in there.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the church that you guys lived at?
So we did live in this one. Yeah, this is the
Oh,
one
y'all
in
live there?
Denver, the big
Okay.
church. Yeah, the
Wow.
big one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But they
that
did
so
they had like a little tiny room.
Oh yeah,
Like,
we didn't live in the dorms. Those were nice. Well, we had our own little private room.
the dorm that we were in, it was small, but I mean we had to fit like 7 or 8 members in there. You know, we all had
Right.
our sleeping bags and everything.
It was
And
like a
so
college, like
yeah,
I don't know what I would imagine, like
yeah. Well,
camp
so
style.
yeah,
Mhm.
how I kept telling everybody that was there, I was like, well, this reminds me of like the barracks in North Carolina. You know, they're real small and you have to fit 4 people. And so that's kind of how like the room was designed. It was basically just a small room, and so we all made do. You know, we were all happy, just talking about how excited we were for the whole seminar and everything. You know, everybody was just pumped for it. And so yeah, over that span of I want to say it was like 3 days, 3 or 4 days. I'm learning all this stuff about all these people speaking against the church. You know, about missionary Ron and Diane and who else was it? So I think they had mentioned Michelle, but it wasn't where they were like really talking about her as much. You know, it was just more so that she was this bitter woman that was going against the church and that she was with Satan, that she had been possessed and whatnot. Like that's the stuff that they tell you. You know, they feed you all that.
in 2013, they were in open litigation with her, so they probably knew they couldn't like
That's
directly.
probably what it was. Yeah. And
Dude,
then they
at
were
that time, they were suing her. When we were having that seminar,
that's
they were
crazy. Yeah.
suing her. That is so fucking
And,
crazy.
and was that one what was that one, the 12 million or the 5 million?
Oh,
That's
that's the
5
That's a
million.
12? Oh, 5? They
With
don't tell you that. They don't tell you any of
um,
that. That's the crazy part. And so I'm thinking like, okay, cool. Enemy number one, not don't talk to these people. Don't go on the internet. Don't look any of this up because that was their main thing. Do not go on the internet. And then that's where they introduced it about it being the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And actually at that time, that was one of my favorite subjects. So I understood what they meant. They were like, okay, well, we have to obey to
I
not
love
go
that
on there.
study too. Can I
It
just
was
side
it
note?
yeah, it
That was a
was
really sweet study about like the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the
yeah.
tree of life. Yeah.
And they explain to you how, you know, it's not necessarily about free will. It's
It's
more
like a
so like
deep
it's the
study.
obedience. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They were like the main thing to take from that is obedience.
Gross. Now
And
it's
so
gross, but that
yeah.
was one of my favorite ones. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
so and so they, you know, they did that. They were telling us all that. So when we got back from Denver, I was like, well, I shouldn't be on social media, you know. It's gonna like basically like you know distract my eyes from God, following God, right? And so I deactivated my Facebook, my Instagram, and I wasn't on it, right? But my ex kept hers, and I was like, why do you have yours? You know, like if they just told us, like, oh, well, I want to use it to, you know, still just be in the loop with what family's doing and stuff. And of course, I'm like, okay, I guess that makes sense. You know, I mean, sure, why not? And but you know, my family was like, why'd you delete it? And I was like, oh, I just don't want to be on it. You know, I didn't really tell them why. And so I'm not on the internet. I'm not looking anything up, you know, because I don't want to take the risk of like spiritually dying. Because one of my biggest fears, even before being a part of this, was I never watched like exorcism movies or anything. Like I even to this day, I still don't watch just because they like I guess this is one of those movies that freak me out, like about possessions and whatnot. That was like the biggest thing that scared me about taking that risk. And I guess it worked out in their favor because I was like obedient when it came to like, you know, if you do this, you're going to be possessed or the evil spirits are going to take over you. And so I like stayed away from all that as much as possible. And and so yeah, this, you know, I'm not looking at any of that stuff. And I'm trying to think what I think that's when they started introducing more of like the community service and whatnot, you know. I think their first one of the first ones that we partook in was cleaning up the side of a highway. And it was like the middle of December, and we're all just picking up trash. It wasn't really well put together. You know, that's they just here's trash bags, go pick up the trash. We're gonna take a picture once we're all done. And so I was freezing. You know, I guess I was complaining about my feet being cold because I wore Vans. I mean, that's all I had. I didn't want to wear any other boots. You know, and so I just had my Vans shoes, and then that's when they told me like, oh, you need to, you know, stop grumbling, complaining. This is when I started hearing more about Father's sacrifice, right? That I needed to be more with that mindset, that I needed to walk the way of Father and this and that. And I'm like, okay, you know, well, show me like, well, what do I need to stop doing? Like, I'm constantly getting rebuked for little things. And I even told the deacon one time, I was like, let's do this because I'm getting tired of like you constantly hovering over me, telling me I can't be doing this or doing that. I was like, make a list of what I shouldn't be doing and what I should be doing instead. He's like, well, it doesn't work that way. I'm like, I don't like how you're constantly just telling me like I can't be doing this or I can't be doing that. And I really wouldn't say it was much of an argument just because I was letting them know how I felt. But they took it as that, you know. And so then I get rebuked by him, another group leader of like the older brothers and then the missionaries. Like they basically told me like one of the things that pissed me off about this conversation was they were like, well, if you're in the military, you shouldn't be you know, questioning your superiors, right? And I'm like, oh man, you guys are really gonna pull that card, huh? And so it was just constant stuff like that. Like
It seems like there are several military members. Do you think that's something they do on purpose? Like, do you think that they think it's easier to get people in the military because they might already have a mindset of obedience and
they
of, you know, the status
structure.
structure?
So they told me that mother likes members from the military because they understand that structure. They understand the routine, following orders and stuff like that. You know, I guess they don't think that they'll have a problem with them because, of course, you can't question your superiors. Like when you're in the military, like if you question somebody, like I mean, you get chewed out for that. Like they're like, who are you to disrespect me like that? You know, learn your position basically. And and so I guess they felt that that's how they would like hold that with me. Like that, I felt like that was one of the standards that they wanted me to constantly live by. But I guess maybe I'm a rebellious person by nature. You know, you tell me not to do something, I want to do it. And it really bothered me that they were like talking to me like that. I'm like, okay, well you tell us to learn mother's teachings and stuff, and yet who are you to talk to me like that? We're both the same. We're both human beings, you know, we're both sinners. What gives you the right to talk to me like that? And then that's when I understood about, well, mother appoints all these people, you know, leaders and whatnot. They appoint them as like, you know, they're in that position for a specific reason, that, you know, that they're chosen, so you can't question God. And then that's what makes it, you know, harder to really talk to these people because already right off the bat, you can't question whatever they say. So are you really having a conversation with them, or are you just telling them, like venting to them just for them to use that against you later on? You know? And so that's when I kind of like venting to them. I stopped really telling them all my business because I'd have a feeling that they would just use it against me at the end of the day, you know? And so that started bothering me a lot more. And this was like towards the end of 2013. Like it was just like that constant, you know, you're studying, you're preaching, we're doing all these activities. I think we also did a blood drive, that one was cool. I used to like donating blood. So it was cool to do something that I had done before, you know. It made me realize like, okay, well, we're still part of like the real world basically. And so yeah, so I kind of started slowing down because of like just I was getting tired of the way they were like constantly just rebuking everybody, just constantly like nitpicking every little thing you're doing, and I'm like I'm not happy anymore. You know, like I don't know what to do to like really keep my
And this
interest
is
going.
still pretty relatively early of you being
Yeah,
in. So
yeah,
like
like there
already
was
from the beginning you were
mhm,
all even from the beginning you were
like
having
one
these
foot in, one
feelings,
foot out, you know,
right?
and in my mind, I had a bag ready of like me just like leaving and going back to Texas. I had a bag ready. My ex didn't know about it, but I had a bag like tucked aside, my military bag, my backpack of just all my stuff in there, always ready to go in case like her and I just split up or something, you know, I caught her doing something or vice versa, right? Um, and I was always thinking like, man, if I leave, whatever, you know. But they started noticing like my lack of faith, I guess. And so the missionary and that deacon were like, "Hey, we feel like you've been doing good enough to where we want to give you a position." So I'm thinking like, I don't think they're gonna make me a unit leader, and I doubt they'll make me a group leader. So they were like, "Well, do you want to be the student group teacher?" So I was like, "Yeah, you know, why not? It'll be fun. I love kids. I didn't have any kids at the time, but I had a lot of cousins growing up, and then a nephew that was still fairly, you know, I think he was probably like 2 or 3 at the time. He was tiny. And so I was like, yeah, why not? And so it was me and another group leader that was, we were the student group teachers. And it was fun. You know, like I would, you know, we'd take the little kids outside. They would play football and whatnot. And we'd let them get all their wiggles out, whatever, right? Um, and then one of the things that started bothering me was that they would make the kids eat last. And I'm like, why are you guys going to make the kids eat last if they're, you know, they're smaller? I feel like they're more important. But they didn't see it that way. They were like, no, they need to wait until all the other members eat. You know, the gospel workers need to eat. They need to fuel. They need all this stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't like that. Like I was like, I'd rather you guys let me cook them something and then let them eat in their room. That way, I guess they're out of your hair. You know, that's what y'all are making it seem like. And they didn't want that. They constantly just wanted them to eat late. But I would give them snacks and everything because I knew, of course, you know, you have to wait in between. I don't know how your kids are, but my daughter loves to snack. You know, she wants to eat all day almost. And so I would, you know, buy them snacks with my own money, and I would do all that. And it started getting to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. You know, I was like, this isn't. I see you guys are neglecting them. Like, why am I getting chewed out because your kid is misbehaving? Like, how's that my responsibility to parent your child? That doesn't work that way. You know, if your child's not listening, you talk to them because they're not going to listen to me. They don't know me. I mean, they see me there almost every day, but I bet they don't even know my last name. You know, and so
That's interesting. So the people in charge of the kids are also like responsible for their behavior in the church.
they are, yeah, because they expect you to
Control them.
yeah, they don't, if you know this kid's acting out during service or something, come to the parent first. They're gonna come to the student group teacher because they're like, what are you showing them? What are you telling them for them to think it's okay to behave like that during service? You know, it's stuff like that. And so I was getting tired of that. I'm like, I didn't like how it was like constant accountability for somebody else's actions. You're the one that pays for it. Like I didn't like how that was still following me even out of the military, you know? And so this was going from like 2013 to 2014. And then towards the end of 2014, me and my ex were kind of like having problems. We were constantly fighting over stuff. And I was like, we need to do something new because this is too repetitive. We're just studying and preaching every day. Like this is feel right. I was like, I'm not happy, you know, doing this. Like I used to be happy going in the beginning, but not anymore. And so then that's when we had the decision of like, well, why don't we move to Texas? And in that span of time, I want to say in 2014, we were going to Texas like probably like once or twice a month, right? For like the weekends. Because it was only about a 3 hour drive. It's not that far. And my family lived like probably about less than an hour from the Oklahoma border. And so I would go and visit them, and then we would also go and visit her family, which her family was closer to the church. And so we would go, and we met the pastor there. His name was Jacob, Pastor Jacob. I believe he came from either California or Denver, but he's in Atlanta now, I believe. But so we met him, and he was like telling us all these things of like basically the love bombing. Again, it started there. You know, he was like, you guys seem like a good gospel worker couple. We could use you guys over here. Why don't you move? It was always that every time we would visit. Why don't you guys move over here? And so we ended up making the decision. I want to say towards the end of 2014, we were like, all right, we're gonna move over there. Let's go over there in January to see if we can find an apartment. And that's what we ended up doing. We found an apartment in like Dallas, which was about 25 minutes from the Dallas location. And yeah, we told the pastor, we were like, hey, we're gonna move here, and I think it was of March of 2015. Yeah, it was March of 2015. And at this time, I had already gotten out of the military in September of 2014, I believe. Or no, the active duty status and all that. Yeah. So I was going to get all my discharge papers, I believe, that 2015 in September. And so we go there. My unit changes to that first unit that I was in Dallas. So I would just have to keep in contact with them in case they called me to go back in, right? But they never did. Um, so I start this new job at this big furniture store as security overnight. And I was like, this is perfect. I'm going to be working overnight here, you know, and I'll be able to do all this stuff that they do during the day, you know, all the not only the feast, but like those other days that you had mentioned before on like the other podcast, you know, like the spiritual Mother's Day and whatnot. Like it was going to work out, right? And let me tell you, that was hard. That was hard because when we moved to Dallas, for some reason, my ex wanted to live, I guess, like a better lifestyle. And so then I took on two jobs, right? I was working overnight and I was working construction with my brother doing concrete work, like repairing foundation and stuff. I want to say like 3 days out of the week. And keep in mind, I'm sleeping from 7 a.m. to like, and these are like days that I'm not working my second job, from like 7 a.m. to like 12 or 1 p.m. So it's not a lot of sleep. And then I got to do stuff around the house before my ex would get home, and then we would go to church, right? But then the days that I would work the second job, I'd I'd come right off of work at 7 a.m., go do this job with him till like from, I want to say like 8 a.m. till like, let's say maybe 2 p.m. Go home, try and take like maybe an hour nap or something, or whatever I could. Wait for my ex to come home, make dinner, and then we would go to the church. And then right after that, I'd go to work at 10 o'clock. So I did this for a good amount of time. I'd say maybe like 2 years straight of just minimum sleep. So I was so sleep deprived when I came to Dallas. And
Have you ever looked into like what sleep deprivation really does to your
I was
brain?
hallucinating. I was actually
Right.
hallucinating. I was seeing stuff. So we had this house. We rented out this house after we had left the apartment, and I remember my brother was living with us at the time, and he had a dog. And his he's got a beautiful dog. His name is Thor. He's a golden retriever lab mix, really long hair, right? He's a very like a red and brown dog. I was cooking breakfast one day, and I looked to my side, and I thought I saw him sitting there, and then I turned back and he's gone. I'm like, where'd he go? And I called my brother. I'm like, hey, where's Thor? And he's like, oh, he's with me at the lake right now. And I'm like, oh man, I need to go to sleep. I was like, I need to go to sleep. And so as I'm walking to the room, I could have sworn I saw somebody standing in the corner. Like when I turned the corner to go into the bedroom, and like I looked and my heart was just racing. I'm like, yeah, this is bad. I need to go to sleep. And
Mm.
that was a stressful time because my ex had just lost her job, and my brother lost his job, and we were renting a house, and I want to say the rent was like maybe $1,700 a month, and I'm the only one paying for that. And so I'm just working and working and still going to church at the same time.
Oh, it's
And
such a high pressure life
it
and
was
then no sleep.
my blood
Gosh.
pressure was high, my cholesterol was high. I put on a lot of like weight from the stress. I mean, it was bad. I was really unhealthy. It's
Right.
That's one thing I've learned, because even when you eat there at the church, what is it? It's just cookies and coffees and
Mhm.
sweets, whatever, like Korean desserts they have there. That's all they have, you know?
Mhm.
And then you'd feel bad for going before and grabbing a burger or something. And even then, that's not the best choice.
Right.
Yeah, so we're living there, and we're going every day. We lived about like 30 minutes from the church, because it's the closer you are to that church, it's more expensive, since it was in a really nice area of Dallas. Yeah, so I forgot to mention, in one of the big activities, or not the activities, but the what would you call them? The, like, not, I guess,
Like
community.
events?
Yeah, well, Oklahoma, or a bad tornado in Oklahoma in
Oh
2000.
God, I remember that. Didn't
Yeah.
people from Denver come out there? They brought the big blue bus.
Yep. So we were there doing the cleanup, and that was one of the things that had scared me, because when I saw all the damage that tornado did, it looked like an apocalyptic movie, you know. And they were like constantly the fear mongering. Oh, this is what it's gonna look like in the last days, you know. Like they were just feeding that to everybody. And this was one of the major things that kind of like stuck with me, was how they do the pictures. They would stage all these pictures to make it look like they were doing all this extra stuff, and yet they really wouldn't, you know. And what bothered me the most was I'm looking at this lady that lost her, like she lost everything, and she's crying, you know. You feel so bad for her, and yet they want a picture with her. Like, why? Like, leave, don't do that. Do what she's asking you guys to do. Find this, find that. Like, don't, suffocate her with the camera and all these questions like that. It's messed up, you know. Of course they're going to do what you're asking them to, just because what else are they going to do, you
In
know?
that moment, did they expect you guys to preach to those people, or
Yep.
were
Hmm.
they?
Yeah, that I'm telling you, it's just, that's what they would do. They find any little opportunity to try and use against, they're just trying to use it as a preaching tool. Any possibility that they can find, they'll use it to their advantage, you know. And so, yeah. So going back to when we were in Dallas, so they heard that I was a student group teacher over there, and of course, they wanted me to be one over there too in Dallas. So I was like, sure, why not? I'm still active in this group. Why not? And so this is when I started seeing stuff that was really odd. We were told that each location has a quota to meet, as far as like starting new churches and whatnot, right? And so Dallas was kind of slow in branching out as far as like I think, locations towards the west, because they were establishing one near that big base in Killeen, Texas. They were also establishing one in Louisiana. I think it was like Shreveport, but they didn't have anything west. And so they were told that they needed to start house churches over there, and I think they called them Bible study centers. They weren't really churches, but I feel like they were trying to make them into office spaces to become churches. And so this is one of the things that bothered me and my ex. Like, we both kind of saw this as odd. So everybody was going preaching, and the pastor had asked, like, I want to say maybe like 10 members to stay behind, and like he picked them all out. And so me and her got chosen. I'm like, what's going on? Are they gonna tell us we're gonna do construction or something? That's like my first thought. And so they tell us that they're renting out this location about 20 minutes south of, of the church building. And so they're like, it's going to be a Bible study location, but we want you guys to go and try it out. So we went over there, and this is where it got weird. They told us where to sit. They gave us all these tables to go sit at, and they were like, I want you to pretend that you're preaching the subject while we take pictures. I'm like, pretend? What do you mean? Like, well, we have to send pictures to Korea to show them, like, this is what's being done in Dallas. And so I was like, oh, okay, so all these members were pretending to preach and practice while they were just everywhere. They were going picture, picture, picture. And I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, why weren't we actually using the place? Like, why are they just taking pictures? Because after that, nobody was going there until they were finding more and more members closer there. And then guess what? It became a church location. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, why do they need to send pictures but not use it? It's just wasting space. And so me and my ex talked about that on the way home. I was like, did you think that was kind of odd? And she was like, just a little, but maybe it's for a different purpose, basically, like, who are we to question it, so we just kind of let it go after that. And yeah, so that was so then after that, I guess Korea, they wanted Dallas to grow into a bigger church building. And so then that's when they told us about buying the new church location. That was the same thing that we heard in Oklahoma, because when I was leaving, they were actually purchasing a bigger location. I guess maybe they got jealous of Denver's size. They wanted to match it, because Denver was huge. And the locations in Oklahoma and Dallas, I mean, they probably like a fourth of them, they were small. But the one in Arlington that the Dallas one got, it's huge. Like, I mean, it's like a mega church type. Well, not mega church, but it's big. It's really big. And so they tell us that this is a time where you need to start saving some money aside so you can start, putting it towards the church. And then that's where I had mentioned earlier, I'm like, well, if we're sending all this money to Korea, why do we still have to put in for this? Like, oh, well, mother only sends a certain amount and then we got to match the rest. I'm like, oh, okay, well, sure, why not, And we put in a lot of money. It was, I think my ex alone probably just put in maybe like $4,000, maybe $2,000 to $4,000. She just basically gave it to them. And then, yeah, that's how they ended up buying it, but it needed a lot of work. I mean, it needed a ton of work. They had to remodel the sanctuary, all the rooms. They replaced all the flooring with like this beautiful marble tile.
When they purchase those things, they don't have to worry about fixing it up because they know they have all the free labor in the world. They're like, sure, we'll take it as it is. We can fix it up ourselves.
And you guys as a family, like, every time you give 4,000 more and more and more, it's like harder for you to leave because you're like, we've invested so much for this. Okay, maybe I don't agree with this anymore, but I've already given like $20,000 to this place. I might as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is when me and my ex started fighting a lot more, because she, like I said, she wanted to live a nicer lifestyle. She wanted to go out and stuff. But then they constantly tell you, like, you can't live a double life with one foot in and one foot out. You're either all the way in or you're not. They use that verse. I forgot. I think it was in the book of Luke, of like being that lukewarm water. Like, who wants to drink lukewarm water? Like, it was always that. And so I'm working these two jobs, and then I end up picking a third job up. So yeah, 3 jobs. And while all this money is going to the church and to what she wants to spend and stuff, it's like stressing me out because I don't have any money for myself. Like, she wants me to take her out to eat and stuff. I was like, I don't have any money. You're either spending it or it's going to the church. Like, what do you want from me? One thing I can say for a fact is your marriage and your love, it doesn't come first when you're in this cult. Like, God comes first, And so like you automatically think whatever marital problems you're having, like you have to go to the pastor to talk about it, right? And so
Safe space to have a healthy relationship.
exactly, yeah. And so we felt we needed to do something like for ourselves, because when we got married, we didn't do any of that, you know. And so we took a trip to California, and I had family over, well, yeah, I have family over there, and we stayed with them, and we, you know, sightseeing, being tourists and whatnot. We had fun. We enjoyed it over there. It was something new. And then that's when we had visited the Hollywood Zion location over there. We saw how they were doing, and it was pretty interesting to see how differently each church was doing.
Yeah.
So then we come back, and it kind of like reignited a little fuel in us. And so we were preaching and studying and everything. I was having a hard time getting baptisms. Like it was hard for me to get people to be baptized. You know, I got maybe like a handful of people, but I never got family to get baptized.
You were
But
sleeping for 1 hour a day. I don't know how you.
exactly, yeah, it was rough. And so she was still bringing in a lot of people. And so of course you're thinking like something's wrong with me. I'm not changing. I can't get rid of this nature, the sinful nature that I have. You know, I'm not bearing fruit. Like something's like legit wrong with me. And it would make me like really sad. You know, I'd get really upset because you think you're about to bring this person to get baptized, and then they stop talking to you. Yeah, so then we wanted to take another trip, and we ended up going to Cancun. And we had planned this trip. Yeah, we planned the trip, but we didn't tell anybody from the church. And we ended up telling the I think it was a pastor and the Kwanzaa that we were going to go to Mexico. And she was like, well, send us the location of where y'all are going to be at, and we'll see if we can find a church. And when we told them, they were like, yeah, there's nothing near there. That's not a good area. Because, I mean, of course, there's no church locations near there. And we were going to be gone for a Tuesday service. So, you know, they told us what to do and stuff. But when we were there, we ended up keeping it on the bus. So, I mean, it really wasn't, because it was a shuttle going back to the I want to say back to the little Airbnb that we were staying at. But it was fun, but we fought a lot on that trip. Like we fought almost every day. And that's when I knew. I was like, yeah, I don't think this is gonna work out, you know, much longer. And this was back in like 2017, I believe, like at the beginning of 2017. And after that, that's when it just got worse, right? And so we're constantly fighting, and I ended up staying at my parents' house for a little bit, and it bothered her that I stayed over there because I just didn't want to fight anymore. You know, I was over it. And we're not really being as active in the church. You know, they're not like they're constantly bothering us, like, when are you guys gonna come? You know, are you gonna be here today? Like the text messages just grew, like it was intense. They were trying to keep us from, you know, like not being as active. And so we were just constantly fighting and fighting. And then we went to Oklahoma. I want to say it was like in October or November, somewhere. It was in the fall. And she had a really good friend over there in Oklahoma, and she was venting to her, and her husband came and talked to me. And I didn't want to hear it. You know, I was in a bad place mentally. I was over everything. And he knew I was getting upset. He was like, I'm trying to tell you how to fix your marriage so you guys don't get divorced. I'm like, whoa, what do you mean divorced? I'm like, do you know something I don't know? And so when she came out with his wife, like it's like a setup, you know, like they had courted me out there, and they told me that I needed to do all this stuff to fix my marriage. And I was like, who, you know, I'm thinking like, who are you guys to tell me this?
Are these
And so,
friends? Are they members of the church
yeah,
or?
yeah, they're members. Yeah. Yeah. And so I felt really bad how I treated the husband, because when he was baptized, I was always with him. Like when I was in Oklahoma, I was always like studying with him. He was also a Navy veteran. And so we were really bonded by that. You know, we did stuff outside of the church. We went to the movies together. We went to restaurants. We did a lot of stuff with them. Like I considered them friends. And he was legitimately trying to help me out, but I guess I just, you know, I treated him bad just because I wasn't happy anymore. And so yeah, he tried to help me out, and I didn't want to hear it. And so then she told me, she was like, I think we need to separate. I'm like, okay, well, if that's what you really want, you know, don't act like I'm the one doing this, you know. And so I ended up moving out. And well, she left the apartment, and she wanted me to take care of the apartment, but it was expensive, so I had to break the lease. And being young, you don't think about how that's going to damage your credit. I didn't really think much of it, like all the credit cards I had open, all that stuff, like it was bad.
And when you're in that situation, you're like, I'd rather ruin my credit than
Exactly.
stay.
So then we end up separating. I moved back in with my parents, and her and I are talking and stuff, but it's not, it's not the same. It's just it's constant conflict. And so then she invites me over at her apartment because she wanted to talk, and she served me the divorce papers. I was like, wow, okay. And this was, I want to say it was like, I forgot when it was, but I remember sitting in I think this was actually before that happened. I was sitting in the fellowship, and I did not want to be there. I wanted to leave. I needed something to like kind of like get me out of that mindset, right? So I text my mom. I'm like, "Hey," I was like, "Would you go to Mexico for 10 days with me?" And she was like, "Of course." She's like, "When did you want to go? Like in the summertime or something?" I'm like, "How about in 2 weeks?" And she was like, "I don't believe you." And so me being dramatic, I was like, "I bought two one-way tickets to Mexico on this, 2 weeks from now, so just be ready." She didn't believe me, and I sent her screenshots. Reason I bought one-way tickets was because I wanted to bring stuff back, and I didn't want to pay for it on the flight. I'd rather have taken the bus, but I regret it because that was a long-ass bus drive. But it did give me a lot of time to really think about like my future decisions of like what I wanted to do, because I knew that whole trip, it was awesome. Like my aunt was making me feel better because she knew I was conflicted. She's like my second mom. My fiance actually loves her. Like she met her, and she was talking to me. She's like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "You have a lot of pain in your eyes. What's going on?" And so I told her, my marital problems and that I just wasn't happy. But I had so much guilt being over there. And so I ended up texting the group leader. I'm like, "Hey, can you send me the church location over here in Mexico?" And I ended up going for a Sabbath day. I think it was just the morning and afternoon service. And then when I didn't keep the evening service, I'm like, I felt so bad. I'm like, this is bad. Like I don't know what made me not want to go. So, but at the same time, it felt good. It was weird. I was like, I was confused. And so after that, it was like we really weren't talking. And I had told the pastor if I could go to a house church location that was about 20 minutes from my parents' house because it was more convenient. I didn't want to be the student group teacher anymore. I just didn't want to be at that Dallas location.
Yeah, when you would go to that church, did you guys see each other? So like
At the main location, yeah, and we had to pretend like nothing was happening.
Yeah,
we had to. It was hard.
Yeah, I don't know how you could possibly do that. Like the emotions sound like they were so high. And so then to have to go to the place with all of your friends and community and like pretend like everything was fine.
Yeah, exactly. It was hard, and I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to do all that. And so then I had asked, and the deaconess was like, "What's the matter?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know if she told you, but we got divorced, and I don't want to see her." And she's like, "No, she didn't tell me." I'm like, "Wow, she's not telling you anything then of what she's doing, right?" And so I was like, "But it's not my business to tell." I didn't want to be that bad guy.
Right.
So I ended up going to that church, and this is when I started to stop going. Like I was going for a service like just the Tuesday and then the morning service, and then she heard that I wasn't going as much, and then she started texting me like, "What's wrong? Why aren't you going?" And I wasn't responding.
Church? This is at the new one by your parents' house?
Yeah, because it was just a house. It was a house church.
Okay.
It was only like maybe 5 or 6 members there, and so of course, the leader there, he's gonna obviously report it, and he would constantly message me like, "God bless you, how are you doing?" And I wouldn't respond. And so this was going on from like May to July. And I want to say July was when I just completely stopped going. And bless you. And so then after that, I was so depressed. I was so sad because I felt so lost. I didn't know what to do. And my parents and my siblings saw it, that I just didn't want to come out of the room when I was still working overnight, mind you. I was still overnight doing all of this. So I'd come home from work in the morning and just sleep all day, and then maybe eat, go back to my room, and then just wait till I had to go to work. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And my brother, I guess, because he had just gone through a divorce as well, he was like, "Hey, why don't you come to the bar with me? Let's go and let's just have a night out, just us. So I went, and this girl started like trying to talk to me, and I got so defensive against her. Like I felt bad afterwards, But she tried to go through my phone, like a complete stranger trying to go through my phone. I was like, is this what I'm like? Is this like a thing? Since I've been in the cult, is this the thing people do? And I ended up leaving. Yeah, I ended up leaving the bar, and I came home and my sister was there, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to smoke?" And I'm thinking like, damn, it's been a long amount of time since I think it was like 2011 was the last time I had smoked. And so I was like, yeah, why not? What's the worst that could happen? I shouldn't have said that because that paranoia I received, I thought I was getting possessed. Like it was bad. Like it scared me so bad. And I was having a panic attack in the room, and my sister came in and she was talking to me, kind of like calming me down. But I didn't tell her like why, I didn't know what was going on. I just thought that something bad was happening to me. And so I was just constantly living in that fear, right? So I'm feeling like really depressed and feeling like just hopeless, and I'm starting to have those really bad thoughts, of like I feel like my family would be better if I wasn't here type of thoughts. And that's when it hit me. I was like, I'm not gonna let them take that from me. I'm not gonna keep feeling this guilt. And so I started going out more, like with friends from work. I went to my first concert. I started doing stuff, I actually like enjoying stuff. And I remember I saw my fiance's message or saw her profile on Instagram, and I sent her a message. I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" Just a simple hi. And she responded so quick. Like we were talking, and it felt good to like reconnect with her because we were high school sweethearts. There's no other person that knew me more than she did. And so I told her that I just gotten divorced, and I wasn't in a good place mentally. And so we started talking, and we went out on a date, and it was good. I felt happy. I felt that joy again. Like she made me happy, and I wanted to be happy without having to depend on somebody. And I told her, I was like, I'm still working on myself. I still feel like I'm worthless, and I feel like I need to prove myself. And so then I switched to to day shift at work, and so it's a really big furniture store that they do their own financing. They have a whole bunch of electronics. It was a very popular hub for criminal activity for people committing fraud. And so the department that I went to was actually fraud. I started doing loss prevention and fraud. Like it was fun. Like we would pretend we were undercover to tell these people like, yeah, go ahead and buy this TV. And then sure enough, we would like take them to the ground and throw handcuffs on them. Like it was like intense. Like I was getting into actual fights with people. And the reason it wasn't bothering me was because I wasn't scared of something happening to me. Like, and that's when I knew something was bad. I wasn't scared of like getting hurt or anything. And I was doing this for like about a year and a half. And I was loving it. I was loving putting all these people to like taking them to jail and whatnot. It was fun. Like we built a great relationship with the police department in the city. It was awesome. Everything was going great. Like I was happy. And then my fiance tells me she's pregnant. And so that's when it hit me. I was like, oh man, like I'm about to have a baby. I can't be living like with this mentality anymore. So I started trying to figure out what to do next. But when she was born, that was like the best moment. It was such a beautiful moment. I'm like, this is what happiness is. I have my soulmate, and she just gave me a daughter. Like it's everything's perfect. And this was she was born in 2020. So from the moment I left to where she was born, I didn't look anything up on the internet about the church being a cult. I didn't look anything up.
You kind of just like quit going and just like put it out of your mind. You were
Exactly.
like, I'm not in that anymore.
And that's when I found out that that was unhealthy, that I repressed it for so long.
During that time, were you having panic attacks?
Yeah, so this is where it actually happened. So I'm having a bad day at work, and they send me to an area that's right down the street from the cult, like their location, the one that I was going to. And I didn't think I was ever going to have to go back to that area, especially for work. And I was there for at least about 2 weeks. And every day driving around there, my anxiety was through the roof. It was so bad. And then I was like, one day I was like, man, I don't want to keep, I don't want to keep doing this. And so then I went on YouTube and I found Jordan's video. And I watched his whole video and then all the Zoom chats that he was doing, like all that stuff. And I was like, man, he's explaining everything how I felt when I left. And so I messaged him 2 years after I saw his first video. And I told him, I was like, hey, man, I watched your video. I'm glad that there's more people out there like me. And it took him like 2 days to respond because I thought maybe he thought I was still in the cult, you know. And I even wrote that, like, when he responded, I was like, oh man, I'm glad you don't think that I'm still in. And so I started listening to more and more of the podcast. And that's when I started listening to The Simple Christian. So then I listened to Heather's episode, and all those Bible verses were just triggering me. And on the way home, I had that really bad panic attack. And it was like a 30-minute drive home. So like I cried my eyes out, and I didn't know why. You know, I didn't understand why. And I felt so mentally drained and just flustered. I'm like, where are these emotions coming from? I didn't know that all that stuff was triggering me. I didn't know I had PTSD. In my mind, how I always thought PTSD was associated to people of like domestic abuse or anything like that, or even people in that seen combat. You know, that's how I always saw PTSD, because I had friends with it from the war. And when I got home, my fiance was having a bad day as well. And I guess I didn't want to hear it. And I just like, I'm just going to go to the room, you know, and I ended up sleeping. So she knew something was up with me. And I regret this to this day. The next morning, I texted her that I wasn't happy. And she automatically assumed it was her fault.
Aww.
And so I was like, no, I was like, it's not you. I was like, it's going to sound cliche, but it's not you. It's me. Like, there's something wrong with me. I was like, I think I need therapy. I need something, you know, like, I don't know what's wrong with me for me to get emotional right now. I was like, I told her, I was like, even as I'm texting you this, I feel like I want to cry. And I was like, and I don't know why. And so
Almost like when you finally get the happiness after like something very traumatic, brain doesn't really know what to do with it, because it's like, I should be so happy, but I feel like I need to deal with some of the stuff that's happened before.
Yeah, it's like 6 years of being stressed and just all that stuff. And then like I felt like something was going to take it away. And I told her that. I'm like,
I think it's a good thing, because it meant like you were in a safe place to finally feel those emotions, you know, and like finally you had somebody that could help you through those things.
Exactly. And so I'm not going to put her business out there, but she's actually suffered trauma from a child. Like, she had some pretty bad stuff happen to her. And so she understood, but she didn't know what I was like, why I was so conflicted, because I hadn't told her. She knew it was a cult, but she didn't really know what it was and stuff like that. And like I said, it wasn't up until like last year and the year before that I started telling her more and more. And so after that panic attack, I was looking at therapists and stuff, but they were triggering me also, because all they kept asking for was like a method of payment. I'm like, I'm trying to tell you guys like what's wrong with me and I need help, but y'all are just focused on money, you know? And I was like, I can't do this, you know? And I was like, I need to find a way of like healing, you know? And so I started hanging out with friends more and started like doing stuff that made me happy. And like just kind of like finding like small little hobbies to do, collecting stuff and things like that. And then her and I were talking, and I was like, I think I need to accept the fact that I was in a cult. Like, I think that's what it is, you know? And I was like, I feel like I have trauma that I'm repressing. And like, it was a lot of stuff that just hit me. Just it all hit me, you know, at once. And I was so emotional. I want to say for maybe like a full month of just being so emotional. And then I just started talking to her more about it. And so then I remember I started following Jordan and started seeing more and more of the people he was following. I'm like, oh, maybe these are people that were also, you know, former members. And I added Kelsey. And then she posted something that you guys had put. I think it was like one of your very first episodes of the podcast. And I was like, oh, let me listen to this, you know. And I was like, man, this is awesome. Like, you guys helped me out so much with like accepting all the trauma and then kind of like just letting it out, you know. And it felt good to finally find like my people, basically. It's like the best way I can put it. It felt so good. And I remember telling her, I'm like, I finally found a group that I'm like comfortable with, like that they know me without really even having the opportunity to meet me. And I was like, and it felt great, like that. It was like a weight being lifted off my shoulder, basically. And it felt good. I was listening to all you guys' episodes. I still have anger phases, you know, of like a lot of stuff that I'll remember out of nowhere, and then I get over it. I'm like, I'm not gonna let them ruin my day, you know. I'm not gonna get
it. It's scary when it surfaces, because you can like address it, and then you know that it's like, okay, it's not going to consume you.
Yeah. Exactly. And what's funny is like when I was having that bad moment, like of just feeling really like emotional, my fiance was actually apologizing because she would always make jokes about me being traumatized, like a little traumatized rescue puppy, that I had gone through some trauma and stuff. And then she felt so bad that she was saying that. She was like, I didn't know that was triggering you. I'm so sorry that I had said it. I'm like, no, it's okay because it made me laugh. Like it made me take it as a joke. And
Yeah.
she was like, I won't call it a cult anymore. I'm like, no, keep calling it. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. I was
Yeah.
part of a cult. And so we were talking about it the other day. She was like, what are you going to do when Olivia, my daughter, she's like, what are you going to do when Olivia asks you about, like, if she ever brings up cults? I'm like, we're going to have a long sit down and tell her all that stuff. Because
Yeah.
my family and her family wonder why we don't go to church or we haven't baptized her or anything. And I was like, I don't feel the need to. Why? You give me a legit benefit of why I need to do that with her, and we'll take her.
Yeah.
Crickets. They didn't say anything. I'm like, exactly. I feel the need to not do it. So why am I going to waste that time? If she wants to go to church when she's older, she can. Simple as that.
I think that is so fair. After everything that you have been through, I think that is so fair for you to want to give your daughter the choice to make her
Hmm.
own decision about religion because of the way we were so indoctrinated. We don't
Exactly.
want to do that to our children.
The same thing with holidays. Like when
Right.
I first celebrated my first Christmas that year that I left, I felt so scared. But being with my fiance, it was still like I felt safe. She was like my safe place at the moment because every time I was with her, I was happy. It wasn't not necessarily like a worry-free world, but it was more so like I was comfortable with it because I mean she's known me for 10 plus years, so she knows how to like make me feel better. She knows me as like a person in general. And so seeing all my family and everything during the holidays and being so excited to finally have me back and stuff, it was really nice. And so it was really nice. And being with her, so she works at a bank, and so she helped me finally understand how like being financially literate, like it's helped so much. Like I finally had fixed my credit. We bought a house. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I had accomplished.
Ask her if she can put together a little like financial seminar for all of us ex-cultists so that we
She,
can
you know
all
what? So
understand how to get back onto our feet because I think that's a good point you make. We don't really know what we're doing, and a lot of us are in a bad financial way when we get
mhm.
out. And so we really have to start over.
She was
So
just
that's a
telling me
really
that,
good benefit that
yeah,
you had that.
she was just telling me the other day that she loves helping people understand how finances work because at least like how the Latino community, at least like my generation and before, a lot of us weren't taught about like, banking and credit and all that. A lot of us had to learn that, as we grew older. Luckily her mom taught her a lot of that stuff. And so now that she works at a bank, she loves helping people that come in and try to understand how loans work and all that stuff. And she explains it to them like so well. And that does make a lot of sense. So I would definitely ask her. I think one of the coolest things that happened was she got to see me rediscover myself. And when I got out, I was listening to a lot of musicians that like I guess they had suffered trauma as well, but I didn't really realize it till I listened to their lyrics. And I remember I heard one lyric specifically that is still stuck to me to this day. And he said, the only person I ever lost and I needed back was me. And I was like, man, that hit so hard. And so then that's when I started like trying to remember what the stuff that I was into. Like the best way to put it was I was a nerd back in high school. I loved, gaming and all that stuff. And she's seeing me rediscover it again. She wants me. She actually asked if I wanted to do my own Twitch channel and everything. I was like, maybe we'll see.
That's
We'll see.
awesome. That's so
But
awesome that you have somebody,
she's so supportive.
yes,
So
somebody to
supportive. I
support you,
I
which
think
is why it's a good time for you to heal. It's
exactly
awesome.
because she knows that I was lost for so long and that she was like the backbone that helped me like heal. I remind her, I'm like, you don't realize like you brought me out of a really dark place. Like I was in a really bad place, and as much as I don't want to admit it, like I felt like I didn't want to be here anymore. And I told her, I'm like, when I started talking to you again, it was when I was like I didn't want to give up just then. And yeah, she's helped me so much. And then when the day she told me she was pregnant, I was so happy and at the same time worried because I didn't know what to do. But Now I got a beautiful little 2-year-old that terrorizes us, but
Yeah.
I'm so thankful. I'm glad that after all of this that I've been through, I can finally say that I'm in a better place mentally now. Like there's more that I want to do, but as far as like being at peace with myself and being happy with who I am now, I can say that I confidently am. And she sees it. She sees how I am. Like I don't let people get to me. I don't let drama get to me or any of that because I told her, I'm like, I don't want to waste all my time and energy with somebody arguing. I had to do that for 6 years. You really think I want to keep going?
I know
No.
we've wasted enough time. It is time
Exactly.
to do what we want to do.
Exactly. And then like how you put out that cannabis episode, I re-listened to it, and when you had mentioned the strains and everything, that's when I started looking into them, and then they started working. I was like, man, now I don't feel so nervous and anxious anymore, It's
Right.
crazy how it works. It's so crazy,
Right. Oh,
but
I'm so glad.
that's been one of like my major things with healing is just, going outside, smoking a joint and then just relaxing. Cause I mean, I don't really drink anymore. Like I'll have the occasional whiskey, but I really don't. I prefer the flower instead.
Me too. Cheers to that.
I want people to know that are leaving, like reach out to whoever, just talk about it. You have to talk about it. Otherwise, you're not going to really heal, unless you have some creative way of healing, then do it. But as long as it's effective, go for it.
Yeah.
But I feel like the majority of it is just talking, just saying out loud. Like I remember in the earlier episodes, it took Tony a while to admit it was a cult, and it's hard. It really is because when I got out, I was on Reddit and I was messaging some guy and he was talking about it. I can't remember his name, but he was a former member. And he was like, do you still catch yourself defending them? I'm like, yeah, I do. Like sometimes, and even with holidays, like I was so against holidays still when I got out, but not anymore. Not anymore.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So what a great story. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you guys for putting me on here. I'm a really big fan of podcasts, and so to actually be able to do one, it's awesome. It's really awesome.
What it's doing is it's helping other people have awareness of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, when you realized that you were on the bus with a bunch of Mormons, like you had enough concept of what the Mormons are about to get off of the bus, right?
Exactly.
And if we can spread enough awareness for people to know what the WMSCOG is doing, then they can make that decision for themselves and they can get off of the bus when they find out.
All I can say is stay away from comb overs and shiny ties. That's like the best way to put it. That's like the best way to put it, because they're at least the brothers there were so big on having like shiny ties from Korea,
Oh my God. My husband has a box of the prettiest ties.
I got rid
and
of
we
mine.
don't know what to do with them because he never wears ties.
I got rid of mine. Actually, just right before this episode, my fiance had a tie that I forgot about in the garage, and I cleaned up the garage the other week when we were on vacation, and I put it in the washroom, and it was like a white paisley tie with like blue flowers on it, and she's like, I'm gonna make an executive decision, and I'm throwing this away. And at first I was like, oh, why? It's a nice tie. And then I thought about it. I was like, no, you know what? Yeah, get rid of it. Just go ahead. Right. I don't need it.
Did you ever think you would be a tie expert in the ways that we were?
No,
like
but
a tie aficionado.
Being in the military, I did know how to tie ties. And
That's
so it wasn't
great.
something new. But you start seeing all these fancy ties and you're like, oh, I want it,
It's so weird.
I look at my Amazon history and I see all those ties from like back from 2013, 14. I'm like, how do I get rid of this?
Oh, so funny.
It's bad.
Well, hey, fiance.
All right.
Thanks for being so awesome.
Yeah.
So I forgot to mention what we were discussing about was one of the things that stood out to me the most was the way members were treated when they like quote unquote fell away, and they tried to return and like reignite whatever their faith was. So there was this member. He was the group leader of all the brothers. And he had been a member for a while before I was there. And when you see a member, the way they act and they hold themselves to like a higher standard, they've been in for a good minute, right? Well, this occurred after, I want to say it was after the that big seminar in Denver. I remember he was telling me on the way back that he had seen, I believe it was like two other brothers there that had been anointed to deacons. And it really bothered him. Like, I remember it really, really bothering him. And I mean, now, like, looking back at it now, I'm sure it was just his ego, but it was just one of those things that he just couldn't let go. And so I remember the preaching and everything was picking up. It was around the year of Jubilee, or right before. And he was studying, he was doing all that he needed to do, and just, leading by example. So I don't know how the conversation went. I wasn't there, but I remember somebody had mentioned that he had brought up how was it that those members had became deacons when he had been there longer. And so I'm assuming he was seeing it more as like, you put your time in and you basically get promoted, right? Well, I assume that conversation didn't go well, because not long after, he lost that group leader title. And that destroyed him. I mean, I felt so bad because, he had been leading by example for so long. And keep in mind, this is the member that actually had introduced me to Chad. So I don't know if Chad remembers him, but he was a really like prominent member from Oklahoma. And so he lost that title, and you could tell that it was like really, really eating him up. Like, it was bothering him so bad to where like he kind of just kept his distance. When somebody's like, they're hurt, but they won't admit it. Of course, because they're putting on all that fake happiness and whatnot. But I mean, with him, it was obvious that he was showing it. But yeah, he kind of started distancing himself. And I remember one of the deacons there in Oklahoma they were just saying like, kind of keep your distance away from him. He's spiritually sick, and he's trying to overcome, basically, which is one of their favorite things to constantly say, is he's trying to overcome. And so he was just having a really hard time. And then I remember this was around the time that I was actually moving to Texas, and he was having a really tough time. I mean, it was bothering him. And little by little, he stopped staying in between services. He stopped, going preaching. He wasn't really participating in any of the activities that, were being held in the church, whether it was those family days or even the cleanups and whatnot. And then I remember he kind of just stopped showing up to services. And that was a big thing, because keep in mind, like I said, he was a really, popular member. And in the words of Anthony, he had a lot of church cred, like a lot. And so, yeah, he never really went out to like establish a house church or anything like that. And I'm assuming this is why, like he, that was one of those things that just, it just got in the way of everything. And so when I moved, I remember asking one of the members when I was in Texas. I was asking about him. I'm like, hey, how's he doing? And then they were like, well, he hasn't been coming, and I guess they weren't trying to contact him. They were just trying to let him be. But I want to say maybe like a year or two later, that's when I was told that he started coming back. And then I remember I went to go visit one weekend, and he was there, but he sat like all the way in the back, and like no members were talking to him. They were just like treating him like he had the plague or something. They just didn't want to be around him. And it sucked, because I considered him someone that I thought was a friend. Like, I mean, you build these relationships with these people, and what's crazy is like half the time you don't even know what their last name is, and you spend so much time there with them. It's crazy. But I remember immediately after that service, I tried to go and talk to him, but he was quick. He ended up leaving and got in his car and just drove off. And it really bothered me, because I really wanted to check up on him. I wanted to just to talk to him. It wasn't even about like his faith or anything. It was just more so I wanted to see how he was doing. And now that that I'm out, it sucks, because we all have gone through that. Like, we know what he was feeling, and for him to go through it alone, it sucks. And it just goes to show you, like, how, like, I mean, how mean they are towards people like that, like, you instill all this stuff into them, like, you build them from the ground up, you like program these people to do what you want for the cult. But the minute they stop coming, it's like, we don't want anything to do with you. Like, he saw everybody there as a family. Like, that's legit how you see everybody is as a family. But it's it's just one of those things. Like, it's crazy thinking back at it now, how a lot of us, whether we've been in that same position or we've all seen it. It's so crazy how it doesn't matter what part of the this country that we're in, like what our locations were at, what churches we were at. It baffles me how they all act the same, and then that just confirms that it's a cult, because they all do the same thing, and it's crazy. Like, and then another thing was, I remember when I was in Dallas, we were doing this really deep study. I want to say it was a 6-day creation, and I remember it was my group leader. He was a member. He came from Korea, and he was I think he was talking during the study, and I think he was just answering a question for another member, and the pastor was walking up and down the tables where we were studying. He was in the front, and then he was just walking around while he was talking, and then he gets behind him and asks him, like, "Are you not paying attention?" And then he goes ahead and asks him a question, and he couldn't answer it, and he kind of smiled, thinking like the pastor was, like, I guess, messing with him in a sense. But no, that was the complete opposite. I remember seeing the pastor's ears turn really red, and like everybody knew that was like an indicator of him getting pissed off. Like, he was like royally pissed off. And I remember he told him to get up, and he did. And he had this new song book under his arm, and he just winded that book all the way back and smacked this brother like dead center in the back. And I'm in shock. I'm like, he's always telling us to have patience, not to grumble and complain, to constantly go by mother's teachings and whatnot. But to see this grown man hit another member who was a lot younger than him, with this book, like, as hard as he could, to make an example of him, like, that really, really bothered me. Because on top of that, like, the members that were around him were laughing, like, they were all smirking and laughing and making little comments, and I'm thinking, like, it's not funny, it's a little disrespectful to like humiliate somebody like that. And so I, after that study and everything, I had asked him if he was all right. He just joked it off, just laughed it off. And I remember driving home with my ex, and I remember we were talking about it. I was like, was that not odd? And she was like, yeah, I don't know why he would hit him like that. And I'm like, yeah, and all the other members were laughing, thinking it was funny. And it just made me, like, it made me mad, because, like, you're in this position, like, everybody looks up to you. Everybody tries to follow your example, because, everybody in the church believes that all the pastors are anointed, and they were all, with mother, and they're all on their P's and Q's, basically. Like, they know their shit. And so for him to do that, it's crazy. Like, you're basically going against everything that you had said. But since since supposedly God had put you in that position, it's okay. Like, no, that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. That's horrible leadership. Like, now that I'm out, and you see the world differently. I mean, a lot of us coming out of the cult, we it's hard to see the world how we used to see it, which that's honestly one of our hardest things, in my opinion, to still kind of adapt to. Us being out of just society for so long, we're slowly emerging back into it. But for them to be doing that, like, and seeing how, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but that's like really horrible leadership. You don't do that to people. You don't humiliate people like that in front of others. Like, I understand accountability, but at what point do we stop and say, like, hey, this is pretty bad. Like, this is like borderline abuse. But of course, nobody's gonna question it, because of course it's a pastor. Who's gonna be the one to say, hey, pastor, you shouldn't be doing that? Nobody, because everybody's scared. It's it's just one of those things. It's just that has still stuck by me. Like, I remember seeing it in my dreams too. Like, like I had nightmares, and I would always see him. I would always see him with that new song, but not that I would dream that he would hit me, but I would always see him. Like, I saw him a different way after that. He wasn't the loving, jolly pastor that I really liked whenever he convinced me to move to Texas. It was after that, it was like you had that sense of fear around him. Like, some people would rather be feared than respected, in that sense. And so, yeah, like I would have dreams of seeing him and my other group leader, and it was triggering. Like, it's just one of those things that it's hard to forget, because it was like, it happened like right in front of me. Like, he was across the table. And so it's just sad that I'm sure it's happened at other different locations, maybe even worse, but like the screaming or just that kind of humiliation, it's sad. Like, I don't understand why people still want to keep going even after witnessing things like that. Like I said, after witnessing that myself, it really did put their behavior in a different perspective, because you can't be a leader and then be that mean and that ugly to people and then think it's okay just because you were anointed for that position. It doesn't sit well with me.
Right.
Boom, baby.